Hey everyone, my name is Poisonblade and I hope all of you are having a good day. So for today's video, I have done it. I have made Planet Zoo sexual because today I'm going to build a statue of Poseidon, a god who is usually portrayed in the nude or semi-nude. So before you ask, yes, the statue is physically accurate down to all of the bits. And also because I'm going basically all out in this video, I also gave him a chariot pulled by, I think it's called hippocampi, basically seahorses. And yes, today's video is supposed to be about a grey seal habitat, but I think that's at most like 3 or 4 minutes of this video. We're mostly focusing on this statue because why not? It's the best way to celebrate the new year. Building a almost naked statue of Poseidon. Anyway, with that being said, let's get straight into today's video, shall we? So yeah, before I get started, I of course want to wish all of you guys a happy new year. Even though I'm recording this the day before, but you guys are going to see this on the new year, so as I said, there's no better way to celebrate the new year than by building a physically accurate statue of Poseidon. By building a dick. In more ways than one. Yes, I'm just going to say this beforehand. In the end, I was slightly envious of this statue that I built. Slightly, yeah. Anyway, the first thing that I do want to say though is don't look at the butt of the statue. Building the front, like most of it is, as you can see, kind of mimicking the Hades statue because I like the physics on that statue. You know, I just like how the Hades statue looks. But then the back. Hades doesn't have a butt, or at least I didn't have to build a butt. And with Poseidon, yeah, let's just say one piece was too large and the other piece was too small and there was no in between, so I had to make something myself. And also, yes, I do fully recognize that this video might get demonetized, but by this point I actually want to get demonetized just so that it happens at least once, because even though I talk about murder, poisoning and human sacrifices basically all of the time, I have never gotten demonetized. Also, yes, you might hear fireworks in the background. It's not allowed this year because of the pandemic, but people will still be, you know, assholes. But anyway, so when it comes to the statue of Poseidon, as I said, this video might get demonetized because I am literally going to give this statue a dick. But, you know, by this point, I just somewhat want to get demonetized just because... Can they stop with the fireworks? Why did you start when I was starting to record? Anyway, so yeah, as I said, I am going to be building a dick. More ways than one. But again, don't look at the butt. The butt is the weirdest part of the statue, even though, luckily, the way I use the statue in Kayan al-Bashar, you don't really see the butt. So I am very happy with how I placed the statue. You also are not going to really see the front because for the most time I wanted this statue to be completely nude, but then in the end I did give him a loincloth just because I'm also going to give him a chariot, so I just like the image of, well, not really the image, but I just like the idea of Poseidon riding the waves in his chariot, and then, you know, he's a wild sea god or water god, so he doesn't really care that his loincloth is basically revealing everything. So yeah, loincloth just dashing in the wind, and then, cause he is not really, you know, he doesn't really have any clothes, I did give him like a big beard and just really big hair, because I wanted to have something to really work on actually. So yeah, I also... Like, Poseidon is usually portrayed in the semi-nudes, not so much actually in the fully nude, but mostly semi-nude. But you guys know that there's eventually going to be a statue of Aphrodite, who I think is more times portrayed in the full nude than semi-nude, so that's going to be a fun one. So that might be the second video to get demonetized, but yeah, by this point it's just like, I want to, in a way, get demonetized. Like, as a YouTuber, you shouldn't say like, oh, I want to get demonetized, because it's, yeah, like, most people's, it's like their worst nightmare to get demonetized. With me, it's just like, I want to get demonetized just to check off that box. And what better video than to get demonetized on than the video where I literally have to build a dick. Again, in more ways than one, because also, quick to say this, Yes, the hair kind of makes me think of, well, in some ways Aquaman, but also mostly the Dothraki from Game of Thrones, mostly because of the big ass braid. And also, yes, the braid does touch his ass. But anyway, so because I'm building a fantasy world, here's the fun thing that I can do. I can change anything that I want. If I don't like this thing, person, or place, I can change it however I want. And when it comes to basically the gods in this fantasy world that I've created so far, which surprisingly still doesn't have a name. On World Anvil I've called it Pharaohs. Pharaohs. Which is literally just because for some reason I had the city of Ferrara from Italy in my head. Don't ask me why, I can't explain it myself, but the name is still basically like, that's a template or just a placeholder name, so the fantasy world that I've created so far still doesn't have a name actually. You know, you might think that Kayan al-Bashar, because half of the city floats, or most of the city floats, that they might worship Zeus, just like as basically the patron god of the city. But then I don't like that idea. Like, Zeus is a very obvious choice for a floating city because Zeus is like the god of the sky and such, so yeah, that would just be an obvious thing and I didn't like that, so I changed the patron god to be either Poseidon or Hades. Hades because he's also, well, he's the god of death, which fits really well with Kayan al-Bashar, but he's also the god of wealth, so works really well with Kayan al-Bashar both ways. Poseidon also works really well because even though he's a god of the sea, he's also, well, somewhat a god of like springs and just water in general. So that also really works well with Kayan al-Bashar because without the water from the floating islands, Kayan al-Bashar wouldn't be able to exist. So basically the water of the springs that are in the floating islands basically are the life source of Kayan al-Bashar, so it makes sense that Poseidon is widely worshipped and Zeus is an asshole basically who strikes down airships with thunder and lightning. So yeah, Zeus not as widely worshipped, but it's kind of a debate which one of these two gods is the patron god of Kayan al-Bashar. I think it's kind of just a tie that they are both like, yeah, I think it's just a tie between the two gods, which one is the patron god. Basically they're sharing that title. But again, as I said, with fantasy or building like a fantasy world, the fun thing is you can change anything. And as I said as well, I really say as I said a lot this video, but I'm building a dick in more ways than one. Because Poseidon is a dick, or at least in our world, Poseidon is kind of a dick. He shows temper tantrums all of the time basically. Basically is a huge man baby and doesn't know consent if it hits him in the face. Also, just really quickly right now, this is the first time I built an animal as a statue. And it's also not a full animal, it's a hippocampi, or I think it's what it's called. Basically a seahorse, so it's half horse, half sea snake kind of thing. But yeah, it was fun to build. Doesn't look completely correct because again, this is my first time building an animal statue. Not thinking of the one that I built for Rudy, because that camel, I have to rebuild it one time because seeing the statues I've built lately, it's really just, yeah, I need to rebuild that camel statue. But anyway, so as I said, Poseidon in our world is a dick who doesn't know consent if it hits him in the face. I don't know if I can say the R word on YouTube, probably not. But yeah, there are a lot of stories of him forcing himself on women mostly. I don't know if there's stories about him forcing himself on men, but again, he doesn't know consent if it hits him in the face. And I did not want that aspect of Poseidon in my fantasy world. But then I also am of the mindset that like a god like Poseidon isn't going to change unless it's some kind of like big event that happens to him, like a life-changing event. When it comes to just religion in general, all of the like the Norse pantheon in Valhalla, the Greek pantheon in Byzantium and Arcado so far, always imagined that they came to this world after they were kind of pushed out of our world, so there is still a connection between these two worlds. But when they came to this world, they of course were new. They weren't fully recognized yet as gods, but they very quickly became recognized as gods because, you know, their powers and such. But what story I imagine to change Poseidon is probably just, well, it's going to involve his dick. So yeah, it was very accurate of today's video to also just build a dick, which did kind of just, you know, appear suddenly in this video. But yeah, when it comes to this story, I kind of like to set this story at like when the gods started to get recognized, so people knew that they were gods. The gods came to this world basically the same as they were in our world, and some of them changed, but a lot of them didn't. A lot of them are still kind of similar to how they are in our world. Well, a lot. Probably like 50-50 split, like some changed, but some of them didn't. Also, yes, I made the entire seahorse, half of it, like the sea part, completely out of those golden roof pieces. But anyway, so back to the story that I made up, and half of my audience right now is going to like cross their legs, because how do you stop a god who basically is forcing himself on anyone that he wants to? So I just like to have this, or I made up this story basically of how Poseidon changed his ways and became an almost celibate god. And Linnea, if you're watching this, yeah, you're involved in this story. Anyway, so Linnea was basically a ordinary farmer, or just, yeah, just an ordinary farmer, and Poseidon took a liking to you. And you didn't like it, but again, it's Poseidon. He doesn't really know consent if it hits him in the face. So he was basically, well, he was trying to force himself on you, but he was, to make it even worse, trying to force himself on you in your own home, in the kitchen. And as I said, this was at the point that the gods, you know, you knew that it was Poseidon. You knew that you were facing a god, but you just didn't give a shit about that. That's just the image that I really like, that you just were like, no. Even though you're a god, like, I don't give a crap about that. And as I said, he tried to force himself on you. Can they really stop with the fireworks? I'm trying to record a video. Yeah, I shouldn't have recorded this on the day before New Year's. But anyway, so he was trying to force himself on you in the kitchen, and you were just like, nah, I'm not taking crap of this weird man. Well, god, because I just find it more badass if you knew that he was a god, so you just, you know, there was a kitchen knife very close by, very sharp. And just 1 second later it was, and Poseidon's dick and balls were on the floor. So yeah, Linnea, you basically castrated Poseidon. And then to make matters worse, well, first off, I like just the mental image of like that split second of Poseidon just looking down, seeing what you did, and just being completely stunned. But then you also knew that like, it's Poseidon. If you're going to stay there, he is going to smite you basically, he's going to destroy you. So you just quickly took all of the bits on the floor, took his dick and balls, and just ran out of the house laughing. All of the way, just making sure to laugh, because you wanted to make sure that Poseidon didn't try anything, and the best way to do that is by humiliating him. And then when you were at the village square, you just tossed his dick and balls into the forge of the local smithy, or the local blacksmith. And yeah, I just like the image of them, Poseidon, just standing in your doorway, just like, what the fuck did just happen? And then also just being completely humiliated and just slowly fading away to wherever the gods live, because this was actually a question asked in one of the streams, like, what about these like mythical realms where like the people go after they die? still think they exist. I still think that the gods aren't constantly physically in this world. They are somewhat in like parallel worlds, or like, you know, they're still in their like own worlds as well. Like with Olympus not being a physical place in this world, but being able to get there through like a portal or something. Yeah, Poseidon just slid away to Olympus, or slid away to wherever his home was under the sea. And, you know, this event basically changed him. And he became a lot more humble, a lot more just, you know, he started to know what consent means. And he also became almost celibate. I also just like to think that, Linnea, that you're now like a somewhat of a saint in like the worship of Poseidon. I also just like the idea of like a yearly festival to Poseidon, also including the burning of a very intricately carved wooden. So yeah, I basically took one of you guys and made you guys into a saint in this world. Because again, this is the fun thing when it comes to fantasy world building. You can make up anything that you want. And for me, the fun is in like, oh, how do I explain this thing? How do I make up a story that makes it so that this works? Because I could just throw in the Greek gods or the Olympic gods and just leave it at that. But then I'm just like, no, I want to change them to fit this world. I can just create whatever I want. And as long as I create the proper backstory and make sure that it fits, that there's no like, you know, that one story isn't like discredited. Well, it could actually work if one story discredits the other, because that's eventually like, that's the realistic thing. Like nobody's going to really agree on it, but everybody somewhat agrees on Linnea being a saint and having Poseidon castrated. I know I'm slightly making fun of a man being forcibly and unwillingly castrated, but with the amount of stories of Poseidon forcing himself upon someone, yeah, he kind of deserves it in a way. And he's also a god, so I don't think that the castration was permanent. I do think that after a while, Poseidon's dick and balls grew back or reformed. Most likely reformed, because growing back that part, yeah, that just seems awkward. But yeah, by now he's kind of just this more like wizened old man. Well, old. The gods can change their appearance and their age constantly and such, so Poseidon basically just, you know, learned a hard lesson that consent does actually make sense, does actually, you know, need to be there. And yeah, Linnea is now basically patron saint of most women in, well, the women who worship the Greek pantheon in this fantasy world, because there are different pantheons and different gods. So yeah, I also don't think that like in Kayan al-Bashar, Poseidon is really widely worshipped, but then in another place he is maybe less worshipped, because this is a thing in real life as well. Even though we have like these 13 or 12 like the big gods that most people know, or at least I know, I like to just try this. Okay? I'm just going to see if I can name all of them. Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, Demeter, Hestia, Hera. Then you have the, well, Aphrodite is the awkward one because he isn't directly related to Zeus. Then you have Hephaestus, Ares, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, and Dionysus. I think that are all of them, but I'm not sure. I always tend to forget at least one of them. Most of the time it's Artemis. But yeah, I don't think everybody is like across this world, everybody worships gods in like certain ways. Like if you're not a blacksmith, Hephaestus isn't going to be that important. If you're not, I don't know, not intending to be married, then Hera isn't that important. If you are, well, I think Hades in all ways is in some way important, but you don't really want to worship him because he also, you know, represents the afterlife. And, well, actually Thanatos is the god of actual death. Hades is just the god of the underworld. Yeah, that's something that a lot of people get confused. Hades isn't the god of death. He's the god of the underworld. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, the castration of Poseidon. But yeah, Poseidon by now is not just this sort of wizened god. He's humble and he's almost celibate, even though he is married, which makes the stories of him forcing himself upon someone even worse. But the same thing can be said about Zeus. So let's just say, I think Zeus is still an asshole in this world. But Poseidon has somewhat wisened up Hades. In most stories about Hades, he is actually the most, like, even though he's the god of the underworld, he's the god that you want to hang out with because he seems the most rational. He seems the most, well, to our standards, normal. Yeah, the Greek gods really show that they were from a different time, from a different culture, different civilization, where things were, well, not really normal, but they just held different opinions. I think, yeah, Greek civilization in a whole, there's a lot of things that we are proud of, but then there are also things that we know nowadays aren't right. But anyway, that's going to be it for today's video. As I said, the Grey Seal habitat was probably the shortest part of today's video. Also, I still constantly hear fireworks. So yes, I shouldn't have recorded this on the day before New Year's because I knew that people weren't going to obey the rules surrounding no fireworks this year. But anyway, hope you enjoyed today's video. I will say it if this video gets monetized, because then I will just throw a little party. And anyway, again, I say this for the third time now. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, there is the like and subscribe button if you want to see more, and there's a bell button, but by that time that button starts working, Zeus will not be a dick. But anyway, wish you all a really happy New Year's, and I will see you in the next video or in the next stream, because I recently started streaming again. And anyway, bye bye.